Why did you betray your family? All daughters in my family had to sign contracts agreeing to get pregnant by specific ages with predetermined men chosen by our parents, and breaking the contract meant losing your inheritance and being sued for breach of family trust. My mother came from old money and married my father when her parents chose him for her. He was a corporate lawyer who saw wives as investments that should yield predictable returns. Mom kept detailed genealogy charts of successful bloodlines, while dad drafted contracts for everything from household chores to emotional expressions. They hated each other but agreed on one thing: their daughters were breeding stock whose value peaked at fertility. They'd turned our family into a business where love was a liability, and obedience was the only currency that mattered. When I turned 16, my parents called me into dad's study, where a 40-page contract waited on his desk. This ensures you'll fulfill your biological purpose by 25, Mom explained while Dad highlighted key sections with his gold pen. The contract specified I would marry Harrison Webb by age 21 and produce my first child by 23, with financial penalties for each month of delay. Harrison was 32, owned several dealerships, and had already signed his matching contract. Your sister Elena signed hers last year and look how happy she is, Mom said, though Elena hadn't smiled since her wedding to a pharmaceutical executive twice her age. Living under the pregnancy contract felt like watching my execution date approach on a calendar. Harrison started coming to family dinners where he'd discuss my breeding potential with my parents like I was livestock while I sat silent, bound by a clause that forbade hostile behavior toward your future husband. He'd already furnished a nursery in his house and showed me paint swatches for our daughter's room, so certain the first child would be female that he'd paid for gender selection treatments. My sister Elena was proof of what happened to contract signers. She was 7 months pregnant with her second child at 19, her husband monitoring her diet and exercise to ensure optimal fetal development while she stared at walls with empty eyes. The contract included monthly fertility checks starting at 18, and Mom cheerfully marked my ovulation dates on a shared family calendar labeled Investment Maturity Tracking. They made me attend Sunday dinners with Harrison's family, where his mother would rest her hand on my stomach and talk about her future grandchildren while I fought not to vomit. When I asked what would happen if I couldn't have children, Dad pulled out subsection 47B outlining the approved surrogacy procedures I'd undergo using Harrison's selection of egg donors. The worst part was the penalty clause. If I broke the contract, not only would I lose my inheritance, but they'd sue me for the lost value of grandchildren never born, a number Dad had calculated at $2.4 million. I knew the only way out was to make myself legally unable to fulfill the contract, so I started researching permanent sterilization procedures. No doctor would perform one on an 18-year-old, but I found a medical tourism company in Mexico that asked fewer questions. I emptied my college savings account, told my parents I was visiting my roommate for spring break, and flew to Tijuana where I paid cash for a bilateral salpingectomy, complete removal of my fallopian tubes. The surgeon tried to talk me out of it, but I showed him the pregnancy contract and he stopped arguing. I spent my recovery week in a cheap motel, knowing that once my parents discovered what I'd done, I'd have nowhere to go home to. I kept the surgical report as proof, waiting for the right moment to deploy my nuclear option. My parents discovered my surgery when their required monthly fertility check showed zero chance of conception. They went apocalyptic, bringing in 3 specialists to confirm the results before accepting I'd permanently destroyed my market value. Harrison sued me for breach of contract, seeking damages for his lost investment in future offspring, while my parents backed his claim with their own suit for intentional destruction of family assets. They froze my college fund, canceled my health insurance, and sent formal eviction notices giving me 30 days to vacate. Mom started a smear campaign among their social circle, telling everyone I'd had the surgery because I was secretly a drug addict who didn't want deformed babies. Dad drew up new contracts for my younger sisters with clauses requiring monthly supervised medical exams to prevent another catastrophic loss. They even hired a private investigator to find evidence I'd been mentally unstable when I signed the original contract, hoping to sue the Mexican clinic. The lawsuits collapsed when Harrison's first wife emerged from hiding with evidence that she'd fled after suffering 2 forced pregnancies under an identical contract. She'd been gathering testimony from other women whose parents had used the same contractual breeding system, building a class action suit. The judge was so horrified by the pregnancy contracts that he referred the case for criminal investigation. My parents lost their social standing overnight, and both of them and Harrison were arrested for coercion.